Want to retire rich and worry-free? Here are 4 must-know secrets. Hey, I'm Joe Curry. I am a financial planner. I specialize in retirement planning. I'm the founder of Retirement Planning Simplified.ca. And today I am excited to talk to you about the 4 powerful levers that you can use to enhance your retirement success. So let's get started. Lever number 1, you can invest more or save more money now before you retire. Okay, so there's a few ways that you could approach this. So the first one is if you're an employer and your employer has a retirement program, make sure you're not leaving any money on the table. So what I mean by that is maybe there's a group RSP or defined contribution plan where if you put in 5% of your paycheck, they're going to match 5% of your paycheck. So make sure you understand what those programs are so you're not leaving any free money on the table. That might be a quick win just to get some more money going to your retirement accounts. Make sure you're using tax-advantaged accounts, okay? So you can put money into just a regular non-registered investment account, but what's going to happen is you're paying tax on dividends, you're paying tax on growth when you sell, you're paying tax on any interest in there. That's depleting your returns, right? It's minimizing your returns. So you want to look at RRSPs and your tax-free savings accounts. Now, which one's best for you? It's going to depend on a couple things, but the main thing here is if your income is likely to be higher today while you're working than it will be in retirement, RRSPs are where you want to start. So if you had $100,000 of income, let's say that's your salary, if you put $10,000 into an RRSP, your income for tax purposes is going to drop from $100,000 down to $90,000. Okay, so that means there's $10,000 of income that you receive that you don't have to pay any tax on now. That money goes to your RRSP. It grows tax deferred. So no tax on dividends, interest, or growth as long as it's in there. Now, a lot of people tell me, hey, I don't want RRSPs because when my parents passed away, there was a big tax bill, or I have to pay tax when I pull that out. And I understand that, but here's what I want you to think about. Again, using that example, if you make it $100,000 today, you're probably in a 43% tax bracket. So on that $10,000, 43% of it, as an example, is not going to you anyway. You invest that in your RSP, you save that $4,300, you invest it as well when you get your money back on your tax return. And then it grows tax deferred in retirement. Now maybe you're making $50,000 a year on paper. So maybe your income, your cash flow is higher than that, but there's ways that you can split income with your spouse in retirement. You can take money from different accounts. So your income might be significantly lower in retirement. And now when you pull that money back out, after you had all that tax deferred growth, you're only going to be paying, say, maybe 25% tax instead of the mid 40s if you pay the tax today. Okay. Now, tax-free savings accounts are also great. For tax-free savings accounts, kind of the opposite of your RRSP. If you put money in there, there's no deduction on your income. So it's after-tax money going into the account, but it grows tax-free. So no tax on the dividends, the interest, the growth. And when you take it back out, so if you go to use it in retirement, there is no tax. So the tax-free savings account is going to be the place you want to start if for some reason it seems like your income is going to be higher in retirement than it is while you're working, right? Now, in a perfect scenario, what you're doing is you're maximizing both of those accounts, but I understand that's not always feasible, okay? Now, the main thing, no matter how you're approaching this save more so that you have more to spend in retirement, it's going to be around having good cash flow practices. So the first thing I want you to do, and you should do this on an annual basis at minimum, quarterly would be even better, but it's to do a cash flow audit. So go through all of your expenses and look to where you're spending money on things that you didn't even realize, or just, what are some high spending categories that really aren't important to you and don't align with your values. So if you can be more cognizant of what you're actually spending, it's easier to be more intentional about how you're spending and save cash flow that way. And there's also, in this world we live in today with subscriptions, you might have several subscriptions that you're paying for right now that you're not using. And that's money that could be going into your retirement accounts. Okay. So kind of a rule of thumb is if you have not used those subscriptions, those types of accounts within a couple of months, just delete them. Okay. Now you might be thinking, yeah, but I know that on Prime, eventually a show is going to come out that I want to watch. Well, you know what? You can always restart Prime in the future, right? So always just kind of anything you're not using, just delete it all. See if you miss it. And if you need to add it back in, you can always add it back in, right? So right there, you might be able to find several $100s a month that you can just be putting right into your retirement accounts. All right. Now, the other thing, which is kind of financial planning 101 when it comes to saving for your retirement, is pay yourself first. Okay. So you want to make sure that when you get paid, you get your paycheck, the first thing you're doing is you're taking care of all your bills. You're making sure you have that money set aside. And then secondly, you're putting money into your retirement savings. So that's what we call paying yourself first. And then what's left over is then available for you to be spending on the things that you want as opposed to what you need. And lever number 2, spend less in retirement. So when you're doing your initial planning, you might have some high expectations of what you want to spend in retirement. And then when you run the plan, you might realize that maybe it's unattainable at least on the timeline that you're looking for, right? Or the cash that you're putting into your retirement at this point. So we talked about you could put more money away, but you could spend less in retirement. Maybe you reduce those cash flow needs. So this is where financial planning and retirement planning, it gets really important to be clear on what your values are, okay? So you might find that if you look at your core values from top to bottom, that maybe freedom and flexibility are on there. And so when you start thinking about having, maximum spending in retirement versus just having that freedom and flexibility to not have to go into work every day, maybe it makes sense for you to lower those expectations for spending in retirement a little bit. Some other things to think about is, do you have the opportunity to make some other adjustments, such as maybe you have a cottage that you don't really spend a lot of time there. Maybe you sell the cottage, or maybe you're an empty nester. You're going to be an empty nester in retirement, and you have a big house that you don't really need. Maybe there's an opportunity to downsize, and you can take some of that extra equity from the home and put it into your retirement savings. So there's some other potential opportunities here to think about. Do you really need the spending goal you initially set, or is the opportunity to spend less and still have a successful and a fulfilling retirement? Retirement lever number 3, increasing your portfolio risk for the chance to get a higher return on your investments. So now we need to first keep in mind that risk is still risk. So higher risk means that there's more variability in the outcome of your portfolio. So that is first and foremost. But I'm sure a lot of you listening to this are being a lot more conservative than you need to, and you're leaving money on the table. Okay. So a couple things I want you to keep in mind here is, one, make sure you're getting help from a professional, talking to someone who does this every day, to make sure that when you're taking on additional risk, it's not something that's going to blow up your retirement. Okay. You want to make sure that you're diversified. So when I say take on more risk, I don't mean go out and buy Bitcoin. I don't mean go out and just pick that winning penny stock. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is increasing the amount of total proportion of your portfolio that's in stocks, but we want to still manage the risk as best we can, and we can do that by diversifying. So we can diversify across many different companies. We can diversify across many different countries. And in a perfect world, what we're doing is we are doing something that looks a lot like, or is, in index investing. So we're not trying to pick the best company. There's a lot of research, a lot of evidence that shows us that almost nobody can do that. So it's not really a winning strategy, and it's taking on undue risk. So the risk that we're taking on, if we increase the amount of stocks in your portfolio, assuming we have that diversified portfolio, is we're taking on what we would call systematic risk or market risk. And there's no way we can get away from the impacts of what's going on in the world on the market as a whole, but we can diversify away the risks of owning too much of one stock, where that company becomes Nortel and goes out of business, right? Or too much in one country. Canada, for example, is only 3% of by asset weighting or capital market value, right? It's only 3% of the total global stock market in value, where the US is over 50%, right? So we don't want to maybe have too many eggs in one basket just being in Canada. So increase the amount of equities in your portfolio or stocks, but don't take on unsystematic risk, which is, again, getting too concentrated in our portfolio on individual companies or countries. So the key here for lever number 3, when we're talking about increasing risk, if we can get a higher return on our retirement savings or our investments for retirement, that could have a dramatic impact on what you're able to spend over your lifetime and how long your money is going to last, right? So the last thing to keep in mind there is make sure as you're approaching retirement, you're cognizant of setting up that retirement portfolio. So right, there's a transition there at some point, and there's 5 years before retirement and the first 5 years of retirement, which are a kind of a sweet spot or danger zone where we don't want to take on too much undue risk, because if things are down too much right before we retire or too much when we first start taking money out of the portfolio, that can have an outsized effect on the longevity of our portfolio for retirement. Lever number 4, so our final lever to pull for our retirement planning, and it is work longer. So push out that retirement date, or perhaps it's work part-time during retirement. Now, at first, I know a lot of people, you're listening to this, you're thinking, Joe, the whole point of retirement is so I can just stop working. But there's a couple things here. One is pushing back your retirement date. It has a really large impact on how successful your retirement's going to be. And so what I mean by that is it's kind of twofold. So the first thing that's happening is that if you're working, you're not pulling money out of your portfolio, right? So less years that you actually need to pull money out of your portfolio for retirement. The other thing is that it's additional time in the market for your portfolio to grow. Okay, so there's two factors to why it's so impactful. For a lot of people, working part-time is an option as well. And then there's a couple of reasons why this could be an actual benefit beyond the finances. And that is that a lot of people, what they get from work is their social interaction, which we know is critical to mental health and retirement. And the other thing is that sense of fulfillment or being a productive member of society, right? So a lot of us, going to work lets us feel like we're contributing. And when we retire, a lot of people really struggle with that transition to retirement where we're not working anymore and we're trying to figure out what our purpose is, what's going to fulfill us, right? So having that part-time work, and it might not have anything to do with what you're doing today. Maybe it's something that you just have some interest in that's going to help pay some bills and allow you to keep your money growing for you while you're early on in retirement. That can have an outsized impact over any of those other options, just because it brings a number of benefits, including the positive outcome on the portfolio and your sustainability of the portfolio throughout retirement. So we talked about the 4 retirement levers today. All right. So by strategically pulling on any of these 4 levers, so saving more, spending less in retirement, increasing the portfolio risk, and therefore ultimately the return, and working longer or working in retirement, you can create a plan that's going to work for you so that you have a comfortable and stress-free retirement. So it's never too late. It's never too early to start planning. I hope that you found this video helpful today. If you want to learn more, you can find out a ton of info on retirement planning at retirementplanningsimplified.ca.
Thank you for joining us for this latest episode of Your Retirement Planning Simplified. Be sure to tune back in for the next episode, and until then, we're here to help you simplify and succeed in your retirement planning.